Can I try to sum up where you're at just so that I can find out where I'm wrong?
Sure.
You know? So it sounds like right now you've had this sort of journey discovering the truths taught by Orthodoxy and Catholicism, and you feel that what the Orthodox Church maintains and teaches is correct. But a lot of your friends, such as your spiritual father and others, are Catholic, and you see a virtue in them that can't be discounted. And the idea that, well, it's true over here, so just go there, is to discount the importance of the communal aspect that you see in the Catholic Church, perhaps, and the way in which it feeds the poor and puts emphasis on that. And so it feels like, I don't know, like too quickly to say, well, whatever about that. That's not what matters. What matters is right doctrine, and so it's over here, so just do that. Does that kind of... Not to mention the other problems you have with,
Sure.
with Catholic doctrines that you cannot go all the way there, like with papacy, filioque, you're like maybe somewhere, but why would I bother to try when I'm also looking at what's going on at Rome, when I'm seeing what's going on at some of your parishes?
Yeah, I think that's all in all pretty fair. I mean,
Okay, because if that's fair, then I think you should become Orthodox.
yeah,
And people are going to be very upset.
everybody's gonna be mad at both
But
of
what
us.
they don't realize is that you and I have talked for hours about the papacy, filioque, Immaculate Conception. And not only that, but like you and I and Scott Hahn have had cigars and spoken about this, and we've gone to dinner and spoken about this. So I'm just thinking, like someone in your position, it makes sense that you just become Orthodox and then be those things that you see in Catholicism. Okay, so obviously I want you to become Catholic because
Sure.
I think Catholicism is the fullness of the truth. But why not do that? Like,
I mean, that's probably what I'm going to... I mean, that's what I'm doing.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for watching, everybody.
But I mean, it's still... It's something that you have to talk about. Like, you're right. You can't just immediately dismiss these things over here. But in the same vein, like I can't immediately dismiss all of Protestantism either for the same reasons. Like, so there's something that like when you look at, I guess, especially post-Vatican II, this expression of all baptized believers are in one degree or another in communion with the church.
Yep.
That's helpful. You know what I mean? That's helpful to say like, oh, good, we're all Christians, you know? But there's a spectrum of belief and understanding in Orthodoxy as well, where you'll have on one movement, there's no grace anywhere else. If you pray with these people, you're in heresy and you're inherently in schism. You know, I have a friend who's a Ruthenian Catholic priest. He was an Anglican. And when he converted, it was between, he's like, I knew I was Eastern. I knew I had to go one way or the other. He said, I had one brother who's a Ukrainian Orthodox priest. And when we would go on family vacations, he refused to pray with us even at meals. He said, that's just so, you know, to him, he's like, that doesn't feel like Christ to me, you know?
But then who's to say in Orthodoxy? That's what I always find difficult. And that's not meant to be a gotcha question. It's just like if I was discerning Orthodoxy, you've got these real issues about if you're not Orthodox, you're going to hell. Or maybe hell doesn't exist according to some Orthodox. And I just want to know, like, how do you get away from having an ultimate authority that makes these decisions to continue to teach the church? You must see the appeal in that, even if you ultimately disagree with it.
Sort of.
No? Not
I mean,
really?
I do. I brought this up in a chat, I think in one of the morning coffee things. Like, number one, people who don't do well with gray areas don't do well in Orthodoxy because it is so yoked to mystery. And even the scriptures are pretty mysterious. You know, the scriptures don't have any like real explicit teaching on things like hell. I mean, you can glean something from that and formulate that it exists and that it's real. But like, what happens when you die? What happens at the moment the soul separates from the body? Like,
Yeah, sure.
you know, things like that. So we need to be okay with that sort of, you know, you can't grasp everything sort of thing, which I find appealing. Yeah, there's frustrations in that, but there's equal frustrations with somebody who can define and parse out everything. So that's, like for example, there's a lot of like Catholic teaching on finances and economics and stuff like that. That like blows my mind. I'm like, why? I mean, I guess it's somebody said like, isn't it good? The church should have something to say about those things. I'm like, yeah, but at a certain point, now let's tie it back into that idea of like a Pharisaical doctrine. So it's like, eventually it became that there was like 600 more. There was just, the traditions of, I got to be careful with my words. At what point are you binding people to so much teaching authority that you yourself cannot bear to keep them? And that seems to be a fracturing problem that I see in Catholicism, and is that there's so many points of Catholic explicit parsed out teaching on every little thing that the faithful within can't keep them all anyway.
And see, I think why Jimmy Akin is so necessary is that I think he would say that that's not the case, that Catholics often make it seem like there is much more you have to accept.
Sure.
And there is actually a lot of play in the joints. So like, even though you'll hear a Dominican talk about Thomas's answer to free will and God's sovereignty, okay, but you still have Molinism as an option that a Catholic can embrace, even though the Dominican thinks he's wrong. So there is this flexibility there, and you might just say like there are these kind of guardrails, and within that, that's actually why I appreciate Jimmy Akin so much. I often find that Catholics get super into their particular thing and
Sure.
their way of explaining something. One example would be the Rosary. It's so funny because I love the Holy Rosary, but it just bugs me when you hear Catholics say things like, you have to pray the Rosary or you're not a Catholic. You're like, but the Catholic Church doesn't teach that,
Right.
except for that.
Well, that's even the thing, like with the laity, like how do they know what holds how much weight? Like it's so defined that it's like
academic almost.
I would have to spend the rest of my life studying how to parse out and define what is authoritative in Catholic teaching before I could even follow it.
I see.
And that's when I think like Jordan Peterson talks about this too, with when it comes to orthodoxy, and what's attractive about it is personal responsibility. Like, okay, you say this too, like you have the scriptures, you have the lives of the saints, you have the prayers.
You have the catechism. I've said that. I always include that.
Sure. And I mean, there are catechisms in Orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, like he says, pick up your cross and stumble up the hill to the city of God. Like, and that struggle of, you can't know everything. And that's what faith is all about, So I guess it appears to me, at least on a personal level, that sometimes the tendency to over-define in Rome's corner almost eliminates, I don't want to say eliminates faith. That's a bad way to say it. But I think you kind of get what I'm saying. Like,
isn't part of the problem that like Catholicism has had to confront maybe different sorts of heresies than the East has? Like if you're a persecuted church, maybe you're just trying to stay alive as opposed to respond to particular heresies. Whereas
you're saying that Orthodoxy as the persecuted church, being like under the Ottomans and different things like that, communism. Yeah.
Whereas, if you've got all sorts of like Protestantism, for example, that's going to make you have to define a lot of things. If people start saying false things, you have to, in response, say right things. And then even in Orthodoxy, if you start to press Orthodox about, say, the energies essence distinction, I mean, you got to get pretty bloody specific if you want to show that it doesn't contradict God's divine simplicity. So, maybe this is just where I struggle to understand. Like I see what you say when you talk about the mysticism of the East. I love that sound. I love the sound of that. And no doubt God is ultimately mystery and unknowable. But if I'm going to respond to real specific objections, I need to give real specific answers.
Yeah.
If I'm going to show that I'm not contradicting myself. So I get that you probably disagree with that, but like, do you really see where I'm coming from?
I do,
there?
yeah.
Like if someone if someone has a very nuanced heresy regarding the two natures of Christ, you're going to have to get real specific.
I know that this happens now in our current context and culture and on the internet, but this whole idea of among the laity combating over orthodoxy and heterodoxy is pretty foreign to Orthodox life. Like, yes, there's a large contingency right now of online Orthodox people that are like, you're a heretic, you're this is wrong. That's not the way that it's done. Like, it's just not part of the system, like, if that makes sense. Like, you know, I'll just leave that at that. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, even as you're saying, you know, something about like having somebody to have like an ultimate authority and define things. It's even strange to say like, okay, you know, this papacy, this Pope figure, this Bishop of Rome, who's supposed to be the source of unity, seems like he's anything but right now.
Yep.
And then even as you have all this infighting for geopolitical reasons over here in the Eastern Church and Orthodoxy, I actually know that the faith that I'm going to hear and pray in any of those churches is going to be the same. So, I mean, you want to talk about unity, like even, like, let's say if Bartholomew, this is going to get hot, but let's say Bartholomew had some friends in who brought...
And just for those at home, Patriarch of Constantinople.
Yeah, Patriarch for the Greek Church and others. Let's say he had some friends in from out of town and they brought a statue and everybody kind of bowed down to it in the garden. You better believe the laity of that church would change the locks and they would depose him. Like, there would be no equivocation whatsoever about that. So there is a deep unity in Orthodoxy, even though people want to point at it and say, oh, it's not one church. Yeah, it has problems, but like... And then, you know, the counter to that is something that people express as part of the beautiful thing of Catholicism, you know?
Well, just to be clear, I mean, a faithful Catholic took that idol and threw it in the Tiber, and it was celebrated all over the world.
Right. But then there's like a subsequent attempt of like, let's maybe make this sound like it wasn't as bad as it was, or then some people made it sound worse than it was, or whatever. Yeah, maybe that wasn't a great example. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I really do look at the two and I see that, like, yes, there's this kind of community in Catholicism that seems more unified. But in terms of faith and belief and consistency, it seems like Orthodoxy is far more unified in that regard.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought about the video.